Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. Alright, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I am your host as usual, and obviously welcome back to the show. Today's episode 164 of the show, and before we get started, I'm going to do a bit of house cleaning real quick because, well, you guys know we like to do it around here, and it only makes sense that we do it, so let's get on with the house cleaning. Especially because today is kind of an episode where I'm going to have a little bit of fun. But again, I do want to say thank you guys for coming back and listening or watching today's episode. It really does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly keep downloading these episodes. You keep sharing these episodes. You constantly keep letting me know how you feel since, well, you guys vote on the topics, and I greatly appreciate that. So again, thank you guys for that. I do also want to say thank you for helping us hit over 2,200 total downloads. So again, really appreciate it. Hopefully we can meet our goal of hitting 3,000 by the end of the year, because I feel like that's something that I want to do, is at least hit 1,000 every year, like grow 1,000 at minimum. And I think it's fair because I think we can do it. But I do thank you guys for that. It really, really does mean a lot to me that you guys constantly keep supporting me, whether you're watching the video versions, like hello, or you're listening to the audio version, because a lot of you, prefer the audio version, and a lot of you prefer the video version. So we do both to give everyone options. But I greatly do appreciate you guys. I greatly appreciate your support. And in terms of support, I also appreciate the Patreon backers, which again, thank you, Patreon backers. You guys are great. You obviously get the benefits of getting the episodes early, which if you want to be a Patreon backer, you can click the link down below and get access to the episodes early. Or you can just, click the $2 tier to just support me normally. But aside from that, I greatly appreciate you guys. And as I mentioned, this episode is going to be a little bit of fun. And the reason I say that is because we're talking about something more broad, but we're also going to be very specific with it. So what are we talking about today? So we're talking about, or I would say we're presenting the question, is innovation dead? And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Josh, what do you mean? So this question can be very broad. I'm being very honest with you that yes, this is a question that can be very broad. It can be applied to many things. But I primarily want to focus on two markets. I want to focus on the smartphone market and the PC market. The reason these two markets stick out is because they're the biggest offenders, and they're the ones that really present the question, is innovation dead? Because as we've seen time and time again, like just being honest, if you look at current trends in the market, nothing really changes with smartphones every year. Like since 2018, or I would say even before that, but starting from 2018, we started to see the market plateau. And this was talked about heavily by people like John Prosser at Front Page Tech. And it was addressed that the market has become stale. Like you see constant videos of, people from like Mr. Mobile talking about how smartphones just feel boring. And now he's doing like the old retro series that he's doing where he's going back in time. Well, not actually, but you get what I mean, that he's looking at phones of the past and seeing how things were more fun back then. And you compare it to now where it's just like they're all the same pieces of metal and glass, basically phablets or sandwiches, or glass sandwiches if you want to call it that. But they're all pretty much the same with just different internals, different cameras, and just slight software features. But this is where things become interesting, because the smartphone market, I actually did a question in my business class where I asked the question to the whole community, or in this case, like the students in the class, if they thought that the smartphone market should pivot to a biannual sale, I would say, what would you call it? A biannual sale strategy. I think that's the best way to put it. Or stick to the continual like annual sales, which you would constantly sell a new phone every year. Or in the case of some companies, they make multiple phones throughout the year, and they just release them at different intervals. Like Samsung, prime example, starting with the S phones and then releasing the Note at the end of the year. I would say another example would be like OnePlus making their normal flagship line, and they're releasing the T at the end of the year, or LG used to do it where they released the G series first and then the V line later in the year. But this is where things become interesting, because we've all noticed this. There's not really that many improvements every single year from the previous year. Let's be honest. Like my iPhone SE, like even when they make a new one, it's really not going to be that much of an improvement. Let's be honest here. Like, okay, a better processor, that's it. Like that's just how it is. I don't see, unless they change the design, but that's not really an innovation. Prime example again, take the iPhone 12 going into the 13, the upcoming 13 specifically. The rumored is just it's going to have a 120 hertz display, and that's it. Nothing is really going to change. It's going to be the exact same phone, just with 120 hertz and a better processor. You want another example? Let's take the OnePlus 8 Pro to the recently announced 9 Pro. The main change is just a new camera sensor and updated hardware, but it doesn't really change how you use the phone. Nothing really changes. It's just a spec bump is all it is. And even Samsung, same thing. Take the S20 going from the S21. Besides the adding the laser autofocus into the Ultra compared to the S20 Ultra to the S21 Ultra, nothing is really different. Nothing changes. It doesn't change how you use the phone. Nothing is different. And I know before people say, Josh, what about foldable phones? That is an instance where, yes, I do agree that it's fun that they're doing something unique, but it doesn't solve our issue of innovation that's actually practical. It's not practical. I know some people get on my grill saying, Josh, what are you talking about? Foldable phones are the future. And I'm like, yeah, no, they're not. I think it's just a gimmick. I'm stating this as my opinion. I think it's just a gimmick that's going to last for right now, but it won't go anywhere further. I do believe the idea of dual screens or adding dual screens as an accessory will be something in the future, but I don't believe having a foldable phone where it's like two displays, or at least a seamless display, is the future. I don't think that's going to be the future, because it's not practical. It's not and I know some people say, well, Josh, people have proven you wrong about durability testing. I'm like, well, that's still short-term thinking. It's still not even a fraction of how long people hold their phones. You can be like, oh, some people did durability tests for 6 months. And I'm like, most people tend to hold their phones for at least 2 to 5 years. That's not even a fraction of that. Like, let's be honest here. If it lasts 2 years, okay, I'll eat a piece of humble pie. But that's still not an extensive test to really claim that something is as durable. Yes, it can last 6 months. That's cool. But it's still not proving the point of how does it last. And this doesn't even include the whole idea with software updates and things like that. But it really emphasizes the whole point that innovation in the smartphone space kind of seems dead, where there's not really anybody pushing the boundaries. Like, yes, I think a good example of that we did have a hope spot for innovation was when Apple announced the iPhone 8 and the 8 Plus, but then they also announced the X, which is the first time that this style of phone was introduced, where it was as much of a display as you possibly can. Granted, yes, it had a big ugly notch, and we constantly bully that because I still think the notch was a horrible idea and should have never been thought of, because just being honest, Face ID is not as reliable as a fingerprint. That's just objective fact. It never will replace a physical button or a sensor that detects your fingerprint. It's not realistic. It's not practical. It's not efficient. Let's just be honest here. It really isn't. Your fingerprint is much more efficient, and it's also much more reliable than relying on your face, especially given the current circumstances of the world right now where you have to wear a mask, and Face ID doesn't like wearing mask. And I know Apple's probably going to be like, well, it's only temporary, but we don't know. Like, we don't know how things are going to turn out. Like, we really don't. But this also emphasizes the whole point where we just don't know. And then at the same time, when we think about trends in the smartphone space, like, 120 hertz is becoming more popular, which I still think for casual, like everyday consumers, they do not give a rat's ass. I'm just being honest with you. They really, really don't care about 120 hertz. If you told them what the difference between a display was, they won't care. They're just going to be like, does it work? Does it do what I need it to do? Does it make calls? Does it send text messages? Can I watch videos on it? Can I surf the web? Like things like 120 hertz and above just doesn't make sense on a regular everyday phone. I think at best they should have just stuck to 90, like what the OnePlus 7 Pro did. I think 90 was that good sweet spot of increasing it but also not killing your battery and nuking it. Because 90, yes, you can see the difference between 60 and 90, but from 90 to 120, you don't really see it. It's kind of hard to tell. And I know some people say, well, I can see it perfectly fine. I'm like, yeah, stop BSing yourself, my man. Stop BSing yourself. But for me personally, the last time I really thought that we had good innovation and a good push forward was the OnePlus 7 Pro. And I had the OnePlus 7 Pro. I had it for an entire year and I reviewed it. And that was one of my favorite phones I've ever owned, especially because, yes, it was unique. It, did the motorized camera. Do I think it was practical? No, but if you didn't really care about the selfie camera, because there's some people that really don't. They don't really care about the selfie camera. Like, yes, they include it just because, you can have it for FaceTiming and stuff like that. But for a phone that was actually a full display phone, like edge to edge, I thought it was great. I really liked the experience I had with the 7 Pro, and it also pushed the boundaries in some aspects as well. But what did they do? They went back, they decided to go with a hole punch, and I thought, ugh. And then they put it in the worst spot possible, which is in this freaking corner, which I hate it in the corner. I prefer it in the dead center. Granted, it's not as bad as like the Pixel 5 where it had a big one in the corner, which I was like, guys, at least put it in the middle. Like, please, at least in the top middle is better than just leaving it in the corner. I don't like it in the corner. It's really annoying. But to me, with the smartphone space, innovation seems to be dwindling a bit. There's not really much improvement, and people are noticing. That's why sales are declining. Yes, companies are still making profit. We're not going to pretend like they're not, but the whole enthusiasm behind buying the latest and greatest phone every year is not enticing anymore. Like, yes, companies can still get you to buy it, and people will, but it just doesn't make much logical sense anymore as it used to, where like, hey, the next upgrade is great, like this is a big improvement. But now I just feel like, oh, it's a minor spec bump and I get an extra year of support. That's all I get. But now we can transition into the PC space, and this is where things become a lot more interesting, because we can talk about graphics cards, we can talk about CPUs, we can talk about transition from x86 to ARM. And this is where I feel like the PC space is not as egregious as the smartphone market, but I can definitely tell that there's some areas where innovation doesn't seem to be the most prevalent. Yes, in terms of processors, like Apple releasing the M1 chip, absolutely, this is a great transition, and it's making the point that ARM is the future, because it can be as powerful as a normal x86 processor, but be more power efficient, draw less power, and also not generate as much heat. And I do believe companies should switch over to ARM over time. The only problem is how long is it going to take, and also doing it right, and also getting programs to be adjusted to the ARM architecture, because it's not the same as x86. Like, it really isn't. Like, there has to be translation, and companies have to be on board to make this switch, which I do agree with. Apple being the one starting it, hey, that's great, because now companies will be more inclined to support ARM processors. However, when we talk about GPUs, this is where, yeah, we definitely see a big, like, there's definitely egregious examples. If we compare the 10 series or the 1000 series of NVIDIA GPUs to the RTX 2000 series, then yes, we clearly see that there really wasn't that big of a jump, and that innovation was kind of lacking in that sense, because there wasn't really big performance gains. Like, there was very minimal performance gains, and people didn't really care. Like, I agree. I told people this many times when the 2000 series came out, which, coming from a person that owns a 2060 Super, I told people, I do believe the Super cards should have been the original launch cards. Like the 28 Ti, yeah, that was fine, but I do believe that the Super cards should have been the cards released rather than the regular 2060, 2070, and 2080, because it didn't make much sense that the Super cards were the better cards. And if they would have reduced pricing, then they would have been good value. Like, yes, I know people say they fixed the pricing with the 3000 series, but lo and behold, you can't buy them because, well, scalpers and bots. So can't really do much there. But it's one of those instances where the 3000 series specifically, from the 2000 series, yes and no, that there's pretty big jumps, like not that much. Like, yes, the improved ray tracing is great, but I still agree that ray tracing is not the best technology. I think DLSS 2.0 is great. I do not think ray tracing is great. I still think it's not viable in today's market. I still believe that it is a niche feature that doesn't matter when you're purchasing a graphics card. I think rasterization, like the people at Unbox Therapy have stated, like rasterization is what people care about more. They care about actual performance. Like, how does it actually perform? Is there a big gain? Is there like 20, 30, 40, 50% gain? And this is where, yes, as we can see with some changes, we can see that, yes, in higher, I'd say, scaling in terms of 4K and above, yes, the new cards perform great, but as it goes to lower resolutions, it doesn't scale as expected. It definitely performs less, or it does perform barely better than the 20. I know people call them the 20 series, but I think the 2000 series is what they're actually called, because, you know, you get it, right? You guys understand, you know, but this is the point that I draw, because when you look at the comparisons with the 3000 series, they always kept trying to draw comparisons to the 1000 series, the original, the GTX, the one that everyone loves, the 1060, 1070, 1070 Ti, 1080, 1080 Ti. They always keep drawing comparisons to those cards, and that's not really what you're trying to do, because they knew people from the 1000 series were not going to upgrade to 2000 series. They knew they weren't, because there really wasn't that much of a gain. And you know, what do you expect in this aspect, you know? But this is a prime example of innovation being very lacking in the GPU space, because there's not much reason to upgrade. If you're still playing your games at the same resolution and at the same frame rate, nothing changes. You're still playing the same game, and all you're doing is just, like, nothing changes. If your monitor is kept at 144 hertz, like, and you're perfectly playing at 144 FPS, you get what I mean? Like, there's not much issue. Like, you're not getting much, especially when you lock it to your resolution and, well, I would say your hertz count, and then, you know, your refresh rate and everything. But you get what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make much sense. There's not much reason to upgrade. Like, I'm perfectly fine with my 2060 Super. Like, I only wanted to get the 3000 series because I thought the new encoders would be better, and lo and behold, they pretty much said the encoders aren't really that much different. You don't really gain that much more benefit from it. And it's like, that's what people actually should care about, is like actual innovation where, like, hey, a drastic improvement in encoders, decoders. Yes, I still agree that the 3000 series, or specifically NVIDIA graphics cards, when it comes to encoding and decoding, are phenomenal graphics cards. I like them more, especially when using them in video editing software or streaming and stuff like that, because they're really good encoders and decoders. They're really good. And I'm not saying AMD doesn't have good encoders or decoders either, but I just haven't tried it. But AMD, they're not immune to this either. They're making, like, yes, I think their processors are making good improvements, like comparing the, I would say, from, you know, the first gen Ryzen to second gen, and second gen to especially third gen. And now we have the 5000 series. It's like, whoa, that's definitely a big improvement. And Ryzen has come a long way. And I do agree that, yes, even though it is still using the same 7nm process with the 5000 series, they definitely managed to get much more improvements out of the 3000 series that was using that same 7nm die. And they were able to get even more performance that wasn't seen before. And I think that's a good push. Granted, yes, I wish they would have pushed the boundaries and go to the 5nm, but I'm guessing that's going to be saved for Zen 3. But this is where things are very interesting, where we're currently seeing how things are playing out. And you notice there's a trend, there's a pattern. And the pattern is people don't really feel inclined to upgrade their stuff because there's no reason to. Like, nothing changes. You're not changing how you're using things. And that's the whole point of innovation, is to change how you use something. And the reality is we haven't seen that in a very long time. And, well, I say a long time, but we haven't seen that in a while. Let's put it like that. Where true innovation hasn't really impacted the market. Like, we haven't seen a whole market shift. Cameras are a whole different space, because we have seen innovation. We've seen the innovation from the DSLR to the mirrorless cameras. That is a trend. That is a clear innovation, because now we're changing how we're doing things. That is an innovation that I think the camera market is different. Like, yes, we're still getting minimal updates every year, but we still got that transition that was big, that shifted how people use cameras, because people originally preferred the DSLR. They preferred cameras like the 90D or the Canon 5D Mark IV, or, you know, the Nikon D700 and things like that. But when the jump to mirrorless happened with I would say the big push, which was the Sony A7 III, which, no, not the A7 III, the A7 III. Oh wait, yeah, A7 III, yeah, the A7 III. That was the first mirrorless camera that people were like, whoa, this is great. Like, this was Sony's big like camera that really pushed them in a good limelight with photographers and videographers. Canon obviously, tried to catch up with the R5. It was a good camera, not, still had flaws. And then they released the R5 and the R6, which clearly loved cameras. Yes, they had some overheating issues, but from a photography standpoint, perfect cameras, amazing cameras. Then Nikon coming out with the Z7, the Z6. Granted, those cameras had flaws, and now they remedied them with the Z7 II and the Z6 II. But when we talk about the smartphone market and the PC market, innovation does seem kind of dead. We don't see big innovations. And I know some people say, well, isn't that the whole point, is to innovate? But I do believe companies are so reliant on this yearly model where they constantly have to sell new products every year, where it just kind of makes it seem like, do you really care? Like, consumers don't care. Like, I get that there's people that will always buy new products when they come out. Like prime example, there's people that bought the 3950X when it came out, and now they're like, oh, I need to go buy the 5950X. And I'm like, dude, you haven't even had that thing for a year. Like, I'm still perfectly fine with my 3900X. That's a top of the line CPU. I'm perfectly fine with it. My computer is probably going to stay the same way for another, let's see, I upgraded my computer I built my computer in 2019 is when I first built my computer, and I upgraded it in 2020. I'm probably not going to upgrade my computer again until, I would say, maybe 2022 or 2023. I don't see myself touching it. And even then, it's not going to be a super big upgrade. It's mainly just going to be, probably getting new RAM or upgrading case or switching a new case or buying a bigger motherboard and stuff like that. It's not going to be super drastic. And if there's a new GPU, then cool. If I see big improvements with decoders and encoders and big performance and like actual gains for my gaming, then cool. Then I'll buy a new graphics card. But if not, then I'm perfectly fine with what I have right now. And I feel like that's what just a lot of people are feeling right now, is that they don't feel inclined to upgrade. There's no reason to. You get what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, in the smartphone space, clearly you shouldn't be upgrading phones every year. I'm just being honest with you. If you want to, that's perfectly fine. That's your money. You make your decisions. But if we're trying to be rational human beings, there's no reason to upgrade every single year. Like, it's pointless. It's stupid. There's no gain. You don't gain anything. Okay, an iPhone. Ooh, I gained an extra year. You still get 5 years of support. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, and yeah, if you have Apple Care, then you can just swap the battery out. And that's all that matters, because that was the big issue people had, was Apple was slowing down your phones by your battery degrading more. And that makes sense because, batteries will degrade. But if you have things like Apple Care and paying for battery replacements, then you get what I mean? Like, there's no issue, because you can just swap out the battery and you can pay them. Or if you have Apple Care, then, like, I pay $3 a month for my SE, and probably by the end of the year or starting next year, I'll probably change my battery. And it's like, okay, back to normal. Nothing changes. You get what I mean? Like, it's not changing how I use my phone. Like, that's the whole point I'm trying to get at, is that this is why I feel like innovation is currently in a weird spot, because it's not really changing how you use your phone. I know people say foldable phones, but it's like, are you really doing anything different? Like, ooh, I can fold my phone like a book. Ooh, look at this. Ooh, I can do it like my hands right here if you're watching the video version. You get what I mean? Like, there's no big difference. And this is the concern that I really have, is innovation dead? Because it's like, there's not really much innovation going on right now. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you guys agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you guys like today's topic? Because, well, you guys voted on it, but do you guys actually like it? And let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think innovation is dead? What markets do you feel like innovation has been actually thriving, that innovation has been booming, or that other markets where innovation hasn't been as good as it has been? But let me know in the comment section down below. Obviously, if you're listening to the audio version, you can let me know by hitting me up on my social medias and, liking the episode, sharing the episode, downloading the episode, leaving a review of the show. Let me know what you guys think of the show, especially because we've been doing it for 2 years now. And I would greatly appreciate you guys leaving reviews to, maybe see if we can get more people watching or listening. But I do thank you guys for your time. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day to watch this episode, to listen to this episode, whether it be, at work or at the gym or driving back from work, driving to work, or if you're just having a long day and you just need something to relax with. But I greatly appreciate your time. I greatly appreciate that you are allowing me to have some of your time, because that's a very precious thing. I also hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week. Please continue to be safe. Don't do anything dumb. The world is still weird out there, so please continue to take care of everyone around you and be mindful and respectful of all those around you, because, that's what we really should do. That's what really changes the world, is when we are people that are mindful, are respectful of one another, are constantly being empathetic towards one another and understanding where someone's coming from and putting ourselves in the shoes of another person. I feel like that's where really change comes, is when we're willing to do that and be selfless and be humble and be willing to serve rather than be served. But I thank you guys for your time. I love you guys today. Please have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend. And like always, don't do anything dumb, guys. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Hey there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.